Events matter. Events have always mattered. If you go back to 1969, shortly after Richard Nixon was elected, the media began running stories that demography matters and the Republicans would not long win. Richard Nixon was able to sweep in 1968 and then again in 1972 before the Watergate fallout. And reporters began pushing the story that it was only a matter of time. The number of black people in the United States was rising. Urban whites were becoming more and more liberal. The Republican days were numbered. Jimmy Carter happened and the media, see, we told you. Demography matters. Well, it turns out events matter more than demography, and you can see this from the election of Rudy Giuliani in New York City, where he was able to win re-election, a Republican in a city of a bunch of progressive Democrats, because he made the city safe again for people to be able to walk around. People realized that crime mattered, and Rudy Giuliani made the crime go away. Events mattered more than demography in New York City. We'd gone through the messiness of Watergate, the collapse of the Republican Party, the virtual wipeout of the Republican Party, the election of Jimmy Carter, and then gas lines and the Iran hostage crisis, and events mattered. And Ronald Reagan became president. And in 1984, it was morning again in America. The economy had rebounded. The president had made the nation strong. People decided they agreed with him. There was progress with the Soviet Union. We weren't all going to die in a nuclear fallout. And he swept the nation, save for Minnesota and Washington, D.C. Events mattered. George H.W. Bush ran for president for Reagan's third term, helped oversee the fall of the Soviet Union, the collapse of the Berlin Wall, and victory in Iraq. His popularity approval went up to 90%, and none of the Democrats wanted to run against him. Mario Cuomo, the chosen man to run for the Democrats, said, nope, not me. I'm not going to lose to this guy. And then the economy collapsed, and voters decided he's a great man, but he's out of touch with our lives. Events mattered. In 2000, there was a contentious race. George W. Bush became president, and the media was helpful to say, only one other time has a nation's president been elected by losing the popular vote but winning the Electoral College, and he was a one-term president. Hold your breath and be patient, people. Demography matters. And then the World Trade Center collapsed, and we went to war. Events mattered more than demography. Barack Obama got elected in 2008, and this is it. This is it. Finally going all the way back to the 60s. This is it. Demography matters. Black and Hispanic voters voting overwhelmingly for Barack Obama. And then 2010 happened. Events mattered. Obamacare mattered. He won re-election in 2012, but you know what happened in 2016? Donald Trump won. Oh, but they tell us, but Republicans keep losing the popular vote. Eventually, this is going to hurt. Except people are leaving the states that helped Hillary Clinton, and the population is shifting. And you know, the people moving to Texas from California are actually more conservative than the native-born Texans these days. Oh, and wait, what happened in 2018 in Florida? The state, the non-Cuban Hispanic voters who were reliably supposed to be Democrats because demography matters, they voted Republican because events mattered. Events matter. We could start the formal open impeachment processes and discover that the President of the United States was running the White House like a mafia operation and shaking down foreign governments for his political reelection, and he will be wiped out. Evangelical voters who love him will turn on him. They will stay home. Or we could find out this is absolutely a nothing burger, as so many people suspect, and that'll blow up in the Democrats' face. The event will matter. How it plays out will matter. And if the Democrats impeach and we get to the Senate and the Senate decides that they're not going to impeach in January, you know what? By November, we will be 2 billion news cycles removed from the impeachment, and events will have mattered. This nation's future is only charted on demography if we let it be charted on demography. And there's plenty of data that the demographics within the Hispanic community move conservative and Republican the longer they stay in the country. But everybody's so wrapped up on the idea of demography. The Federal Reserve has cut interest rates again. The interest rates going down will help stimulate the economy, or at least forestall an economic slowdown, further slowdown in this country. The economy has already slowed down. If it happens 2 quarters in a row, it's considered a recession. The Fed's cutting interest rates may keep us out of a recession as the rest of the world goes into a recession. If the President of the United States can steer an economy where he will get credit or blame and steer it away from a recession, those events will matter. If people keep their jobs, those events will matter. If people go back to work, those events will matter. If people lose their jobs, those events will matter. We have no idea right now what's going to happen in November of next year. Here's what I know to be true today. I don't know anybody who voted for Donald Trump in 2016 and is now saying, not going to vote for him. I know a lot of people who didn't vote for Donald Trump in 2016 who are now saying, don't like him, but those guys are crazy. I'm going to vote for him. I'm in that camp. And I know a lot of people who are. Just because the opposition to Donald Trump is louder does not mean there's more of it. In fact, of the people I know who are convinced the president is toast, they were convinced the president was toast in 2016. They were fundamentally convinced the president was going to lose in 2016. And when he won, you know what they did? They didn't have any recognition of humility that, maybe I should sit back and reassess what actually is happening in American politics and what bubble am I in. No, they just got louder and more pissed off. But just because they're louder and angrier today does not mean there are more of them. The polls do suggest that right now, if the election were held today, the president would lose in swing states that he won in 2016. He's not doing well in those states, but you know what? The election is not today. The election is not today. A few weeks ago, the headlines were about Greta Thunberg. Whatever happened to Greta Thunberg? She's back in the news today. She turned down a prize, said environmentalists don't need any more prizes. But whatever happened to her? How did she get home? Did she go home? I have no idea. Nobody covered that part. We've moved on. A few months ago, we were talking about concentration camps on the southern border. I assume the concentration camps are still there, but the Democrats don't actually care about them because they've stopped talking about them, but nothing's changed. There's been no new funding to change the situation. So maybe there were never concentration camps to begin with, but the Democrats have moved on from it. We're in a brand new news cycle where that's out of it. The entire situation at the southern border is out of the news cycle. Whatever happened to the southern border? Did it get fixed? Is it still bad? Is it improving? Is it worsening? I have no idea. The media is not covering it anymore, and they sure were months ago, and I wonder why. Maybe because they thought it would help the Democrats. Events matter. Events change things. This is an event they've moved on from. It must not help the Democrats anymore. Before that, there was a government shutdown. Before that, there was talk of health care reform. Health care reform again. There were the president's tax cuts. We moved on from that headline as well. There were all sorts of other headlines out there that we've completely moved on from. What about North Korea? Do you remember the North Korean summit? We actually met with North Korea. The North Koreans were thinking of coming here. The president, we had a trade war with China. They were going to go to Chile to deal with the trade war situation there, but now they're not because Chile's canceled that. The world isn't rioting and events matter, and we've moved on from 3 million news cycles in just the past 3 months. Who can keep up? You get to November of next year and the president has been impeached but not convicted and he's still president. Is that really going to matter? Will it linger? Or will we be so far into another new news cycle that people will have totally forgotten that had happened in 2000 and the beginning of 2020? Because that'll happen at the beginning of 2020, and then we'll get into a Democratic primary process, and the Democrats will fight each other while the president is beating them up with his campaign war chest, defining them before they can define themselves, and people will totally forget he had ever been impeached. Events matter. The rapid pace of the news timeline matters. All of that matters way more than demography. People will stay home. You get Elizabeth Warren as the Democratic nomination, and she's completely out to lunch with a bunch of people. She can't resonate with black voters. Hispanic voters are scared of her because they're listening to her policies and they're thinking, my God, that's what our families fled from in Central and South America. We don't want it here. We may not vote Republican, but we're going to sit this out. Well, those events matter too. Candidates matter and events matter way more than demography matters. Voters sometimes vote by not voting. But when you listen in Washington, D.C. today, everything is about the president and impeachment. The president got Baghdadi. That was a big news cycle for 48 hours, mostly because the media was outraged at the way the president announced it, and now they're back to impeachment. They've taken a sidetrack from impeachment over to the Photoshop of a dog with the president, and now they're back to impeachment. There's going to be a vote on impeachment today, and then there will be more testimony in impeachment, and they'll focus on that, and then another event will happen. They'll move on to that, and then they'll come back to impeachment. But eventually, impeachment will end. And impeachment will probably end in January. When it goes to the Senate, the president is not convicted, and then the media's like, okay, time to move on. Hey, there's a Democratic primary happening. What's going on in the caucuses? Over to you, Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina. And we'll have all moved on. Our kids will make it through another year in school. The world will have moved around the sun another full orbit, and on and on and on it'll go. There will be other events. They will matter. The events of the past may echo into the future. They may not. We may completely forget next year what happened this year. In fact, I can't remember what happened a month ago because the news cycle moves so long. To think that all of these news cycles add up and amount and magnify to help people make their decision when most Americans are single-mindedly focused right now on their job, on their family, on other things, the news cycle of today will probably not shape people's minds a year from now. And guess what? A year from now is the election. On Monday, we will be 1 year away from the election. And there's a lot of news cycles between now and then. And the president is spending his money like a machine to let everyone know he's going to define the Democrats before they can define him. Will it work? I don't know. There are a lot of people who don't like the president. It's going to be hard for him to change their minds. But it sounds like he's hit on an interesting message. You don't have to like me. I'm not a nice guy, but I'm getting the job done and keeping you safe. And that'll be a message that resonates with people. Events will matter way more than demography and way more than the media's sick obsession with Donald Trump, where they can't even look at a Photoshop from the Ben Shapiro Daily Wire website and say, this isn't really a story. No. To them, it was a story. And that's part of the problem. They generate so many stories that are so stupid that more and more Americans tune out the news overall. And so the events matter less. Everything matters less. And more people check out of politics. And it becomes the partisans who are fueled and engaged and enraged who show up at the polls. And you know what? Right now, there appear to be more Republicans engaged and enraged at the Democrats wanting to take away their guns and taxes than there are Democrats. That matters too.
Honest news and conservative views.
Never separate.